Hi there, I'm Dominic, and welcome to Vlog 4 of me and composing music. And who am I? That's a good question. I think music brings you in touch, perhaps, with basically who you are and where you're going in life and what your emotional state is. Um, I'm not Mark Applebaum, that's for sure. And let's have a look at Mark Applebaum, who's Associate Professor of Composing at Stanford University. There he is. He's grounded in classical music training and in the Juilliard School of Training. He's highly virtuosic piano player, jazz and classical music, and he is obviously he can read music fast at sight. He does his own music engraving. Obviously, a fast notation writer, and an excellent pianist and everything like that. So this is his ground, as in classical, jazz, traditional, conventional music production using acoustic instruments, and I suppose in his case the piano is his instrument of choice. Now he's completely out there in terms of innovation. So Mark Applebaum and innovation sort of almost go hand in hand, and yet his innovations are grounded in solid music theory and compositional process and the classical era, and indeed traditional modernism as well. Come to think of that, so he's connected. His roots, lie in his childhood, in his upbringing, in his professional training. So no matter how far he goes out into innovation and crossing boundaries, and combining different disciplines and artistic endeavors and pursuits and interests, he's always grounded in his roots go deep into the classical era. And so many composers obviously are like Mark, and but then obviously a lot of people that are brilliant instrumentalists are not necessarily interested in composing, and there have been a couple of examples of people that weren't into music theory, or couldn't read music very well, or couldn't play instruments very well, who actually were into composing. And of course the classic one is Berlioz, although I think he actually did quite a bit of training, in fact. And Wagner claims he didn't do much music training, but in fact he did as well. He sort of argued with all his professors about music, but in fact he too was grounded in classical music training. But now, for me, I belong to a generation of people that basically we didn't want to eat our first course. We wanted to go straight to the dessert. So if the first course is meat and potatoes, is your instrumentalist skills, and your music theory, grasp of music theory, and your interest in that, as well as your skills in writing notation and reading at sight fast. The skill set is your meat and potatoes, but my generation, well, a certain sort of category of people like me, we want to get to the dessert, and the dessert is composing music. Dessert is expressing ourselves, and so, but we don't have a foundation. And as I said before, what happens if you don't have a foundation? Your building is going to fall down. You're not going to actually express yourself as fully as you might want to, in in many ways. However, my generation, my sort of category of person, we belong to the generation where technology, the digital audio workstation, and the sequencer staff is our foundation. So we are using the tools, such as the digital audio workstation, the DAW, and we're using perhaps other sort of compositional software like Cogitone's Synfire, if we can afford it, and and Rapid Composer by Music Developments, which is a much more affordable Mac and Windows program, and we are using these bits of software, and we're using our iPads and all the different iPad apps that make instant compositions available, and actually speed up the compositional process and give you loads of choices, immediate choices which you can use, and you can decide on where you want to go with your composition much more efficiently and much speedier. Although I have to say, I don't really like being given a list of options and choices. I want my music to grow organically, and I want the choices that I make to sort of come from a place of my own personal. I want the piece to create itself, really. You know, I don't want people kind of breathing down my neck and saying you should do this or you should do that, or I don't want a piece of software to give me loads of lists of options and I'm sitting there thinking I don't know which one to choose, because I don't think it's a matter of choice. I think there's only one way a piece of music can possibly go logically with it consistent unto itself. It's like, you know, it's like I mean, a plant, an oak tree, like doesn't have a choice in the matter. It can only become an oak tree from an acorn. You know, it can't become any other tree from its seed, you see. So I think that you have a seed of an idea, and the piece of music can only go in one direction. I know it could go in any direction, and it may seem a bit weird to say that, but in the end, you look back and you think, yeah, this piece of music could have only come from one source and could have only had one sort of trajectory to get where it is today, which is a finished piece of music, you know. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. Anyway, so we have all these pieces of software, and the software and the MIDI controllers, the breath controllers and the keyboard controllers and the pots and the sliders and XY axes and the USB rings and the expensive USB controller gloves and all that. This is our foundation. Technology is our foundation, and we use this technology to compose music, to arrive at the same place, to innovate and to create and to express ourselves and to express our subconscious selves. We get to the same place as Mark does, who go away, who basically you know, is getting there from his roots and his foundation, which is, you know, classical music training. However, I think that you know, for my own self, you know, I'm acquiring music theory, and I'm acquiring various skills along the way. I'm just not starting at zero and going to hero. You know, for example, I love Haydn. I'm very interested in Haydn's quartets. So I might go to a lecture, or I might see a lecture on YouTube about Haydn's use of harmony in the quartets. You know, and they might use lots of terms that I don't understand, even simple terms like triad and things like that. So basically what you do is you take lots of notes at the lecture, right? And then you go home and you underline or you highlight with highlight pen all the words that you really don't understand. Now you really have to be very honest with yourself, okay? Because you may think you understand a term, but you actually in fact don't. Example, triad, you think that's got something to do with three because it's got tri in it. And so you kind of think, well, I know what a triad is, but do you really know what a triad is? You've got to you know, see it in notation form. You've got to know you've got to know the definition of it. You've got to be able to kind of write triads down as well, which would be kind of nice, and kind of test yourself and test your memory and apply your knowledge of triads to writing music composed entirely of triads, for example. So you want to kind of like challenge yourself. Ask yourself the question, do I really know what a triad is? Do I really know what diatonic scale is, or do I know what chromaticism is? So you've got to really underline these words and then go away and look these words up and apply these words to little practices or exercises. And I think it's very good. So because you're motivated, you see, because you want to understand the lecture, about Haydn that you probably have very little understanding of because you don't have any grounding in music theory. You go away and you're very much motivated to find out what these words, these magic words mean, so that you can use them in your own magic, in your own music making. All right. So basically, I'm a kind of acquiring the same foundation that someone like Mark has naturally acquired over the years. I'm acquiring it sort of piecemeal, but I am relying on software. I'm relying on the digital audio workstation and the sequencer staff as my main instrument of choice, and in order to get me from A to B, in order to get me composing and get me innovating and things like that. So that's just all I wanted to say on this particular on a bit of philosophy, and just thought I'd sort of share that and throw that open to discussion.